Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera semua. Hari ini, today we will start with the new subtopic, which is subtopic 2.6, the internet address. So we are still in chapter 2, internet technology. There are 4 learning outcomes for this subtopic. The yellow text of learning outcome A and B is the learning outcome that you should achieve during the lecture session. So there are learning outcome to describe the purpose of an IP address, and the second learning outcome is to identify basic structure of IPv4 and IPv6. The black text learning outcomes, the learning outcome C, explain the reason why IPv6 is used instead of IPv4, and learning outcome D, explain the relationship between IP address and domain name, are both learning outcomes that you should achieve during the tutorial session. Now, before we continue with 2.6 internet address, I would like to recap first all the subtopics that we have discussed in chapter 2, internet technology. We start with 2.1. 2.1 is the topic that talk about the definition of network, the introduction of network. So what is network? Network is a collection of devices connected together via communication device and transmission media. You should also know the type of communication device such as router and switch. And you should also know the category of transmission media, which is wireless transmission media and physical transmission media, such as twisted pair cable and coaxial cable. In 2.2 subtopic, we covered all the parts of network architecture. There are 2 types of network architecture, which is client-server architecture and peer-to-peer architecture. In 2.3 subtopic, we classify the network based on the geographical area covered by both LAN and WAN. LAN covered the limited geographic area, whereas WAN covered the largest or the world geographical area. In 2.4 subtopic, we discovered or we talk about the definition of the internet. We also talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the internet and the technologies of internet such as the intranet and the extranet. What are the difference between both intranet and extranet? In 2.5 subtopic discuss about broadband internet connection. What is broadband internet connection? Is a type of internet connection which is always on, provide high-speed internet access. There are 2 types of broadband internet connection, which is wireless broadband internet connection and wired broadband internet connection. Now, we are in 2.6 subtopic, the internet address. We are going to talk about the internet protocol that provides the communication between devices and other devices on the network. Let's start with the introduction to internet address. So, network is what you learned during the previous lesson is a collection of devices connected together via communication device and transmission media. But in order for the devices on the network, communicate each other or sharing the hardware or sharing the information and data between devices and devices on the network is not just simply by connecting through the transmission media and communication device. The other thing that needed for the network to be properly works is the address of each devices on the internet. Now, the internet relies on an addressing system much like the postal service to send data to a computer or device at specific destination. So any device wishing to use internet protocol must at least have an IP address. So this IP address is important to locate the destination of your information or the location of the devices that you intend to retrieve the information from. An Internet Protocol address is a sequence of numbers that uniquely identifies the location of each computer or device connected on the Internet. Now, what is the purpose of IP address? Why do we need an address between devices for each devices on the network? So the most importantly, IP address is used as interface identification for a network of a machine, which it serves to provide a location of machine. To provide a location of a machine like a home address. It allows the computers to send and receive information to and from specific computers in a given network. There are two types of an IP address. The IPv4 and the IPv6. Now, the Internet Protocol address provides for addressing and routing Internet packets from one computer to another computer on the network. So, IPv4 and IPv6 allows the information or the Internet packets to be routed on the network. An IP address will distinguish a computer from other computer on the internet so that your intended devices can be reached on the network. So both IP address IPv4 and IPv6 have their own structure. So let's start with the basic structure of IPv4. So this is an example of IPv4. As you can see, we have the IPv4 address 172.16.254.1. Now IPv4 is a unique 32-bit number scheme. 32-bit number scheme. So an IPv address consists of dotted decimal notation. 172 is a decimal dot 16.254.1, which we call it as 4 groups hexadecimal number to combine together as an IPv4 structure. Each hexadecimal or each group of the number consists of 8 bits of binary digit or 1 byte binary digit. So if we have 4 combination of hexadecimal number, total up it is 32-bit number for one IPv4 address. Now, the first three group of IP address identifies the network of your devices, and the last group of IPv4 is to identify the specific computer or devices on the network. So as a summary, this is the definition or the explanation of basic structure of IPv4. IPv4 consists of 4 groups of numbers, ranges from 0 to 255, which is separated by a period or a dot. It consists of 2 parts. The first 3 groups identifies the network, and the last group of number identifies a specific machine or devices connected on the network. It is called as IPv4 is called as 32-bit address scheme, which allows a total of 2 power of 32 addresses to be developed. Now let's take a look at the basic structure of IPv6. The IPv6 consists of 8 groups of hexadecimal number, 8 groups of 4-digit hexadecimal number. So the first group, the second, third, fourth, fifth, 6, 7, and 8 groups hexadecimal number. So each group of hexadecimal number is the combination of 16-bit binary number. 16-bit of binary number. So the total size of one IPv6 address is 16 times 8, which is equal to 128 bit. In other words, IPv6 is a 126-bit scheme of IP address. The summary for basic structure of IPv6. IPv6 represented as 8 groups of 4-digit hexadecimal number which separated by a colon. It consists of 3 parts. The first 3 groups identifies the network. The next 2 groups identifies the location between network, and the last 3 groups of IPv6 structure identifies the specific machine or device or host. So the first 5 groups actually identifies the network. Now, IPv6 uses 128-bit address scheme, which allow a total of 2 power 128 addresses. Now, this is the example of valid structure of IPv6. Let's take a look at the first example. Now, the first example, instead of writing 0425, this part, instead of typing 0425, we wrote 425. We wrote 425, dropping out the zeros in front of the group. Okay, dropping out the zeros in front of the groups. The second example is use 0 0 instead of writing the whole 4-digit 0. For example, this part. So we shorten the 4 groups of zeros to 1, 1 zeros. So this is the third example of valid structure of IPv6. How we simplify the zeros by using this symbol. As a summary, between IPv4 versus IPv6, so IP address stands for a number that uniquely identifies each device connected to the internet. There are two types of IP address scheme, which is IPv4 and IPv6. IPv4 consists of 4 groups of number, each separated by a period, whereas IPv6 represents as 8 groups of 4 digits hexadecimal separated by colon. Both IPv4 and IPv6 is used to allow each machine present on the internet to be located. IPv4, the first 3 groups number identifies the network, and the last group of number identifies specific device, such as 50. The number in each group between the number of each group of IPv4 must always be between 0 to 255 only to be valid. And each address consists of 32 bits. So the size of each address IPv4 is 32 bits, which potential for a maximum of 2 power of 32 addresses. IPv6, the number of each group is 4 digits hexadecimal. Each address consists of 128 bits. In other words, the size of each IPv6 address is around 128 bits of memory, with the potential of maximum 2 power 128 addresses. Now you have learned two basic structure of IP address, IPv4 and IPv6. That is what you should gain or you should learn during the lecture session. Now we are moving a little bit to the tutorial session. Just a general part of the tutorial session. Now why do we need actually IPv6? Is IPv4 is not enough for us to create the network? Now, the reason why IPv6 is used is because they are increasing of devices connected onto the internet. Because of the increasing of devices, we must have much more addresses to cover all the devices connected on the network. Now, IPv4 addresses are running out. It's all limited to the size of 2 power of 32 addresses only. Then IPv6 is used to overcome the shortage of IPv4. Okay, so why IPv6 is used? It's because of to overcome the limitation or the shortage of IPv4. Now, the other reason of the use of IPv6 become popular is because IPv6 provide much larger address space, and it also improves the traffic routing compared to IPv4 that we had. Now, IPv6 also provides better security. and better support of real-time multicast self-network bandwidth. Now, once we know about the IP address, the question is, what is the relationship between IP address and domain name? So what is actually domain name? So why do we need to learn about domain name? Alright, just put this situation like this. When you are looking for certain website on the internet, you are browsing a certain website on the internet, you start with typing the address of the website in your browser, on your browser. So the address that you type in the browser is actually what we call as web address. Always start with www.example.com, for example, this address. Okay, you always start with the name of the website. Type inside your browser search. Okay. So domain name is actually the part of the web address that you type in a browser address bar to access the website. Now, so what is the relationship between the web address, domain name, and the IP address? So domain name is a text base which corresponds to the IP address of a server that hosts a website. In other words, domain name is the translation of numbered IP address. The translation in text of IP address. For example, as given here, as you can see, we have the domain name www.example.com. www.example.com is correspond to the IP address IPv4S 93.184.216.34, and it also corresponds to IPv6 address with 2606.2201.248.1893.2568194.6 in IPv6 translation. So why do we need to translate or to create another version of IP address with domain name? Because IP address is always in number, is a type of number. It is much difficult for us as a human to memorize the address. The lengthy IP addresses can be difficult to remember. The internet supports domain names. Okay, so actually the use of domain name is to cover the weakness of ourselves, the weakness of us, the human, to memorize the number itself. So take an example of this domain name. So this is a domain name part of a web address. So the domain name structure starts with standard www, which stands for World Wide Web. A World Wide Web for specific website protocol. And then we have the example, which is the name of the website. And com is actually a TLD part. The last section of domain name must have the TLD. TLD stands for top level domain. Please remember, TLD stands for top level domain. So com is the top level domain for www.example.com. There are two types of top level domain. Which is generic top level domain and country code top-level domain. So if your domain name ends with G generic, it identifies the organization associated with the domain name, such as COM stand for commercial organization and MIL stand for military organization. CCTLD stand for country code TLD, which identifies the country associated with the domain, such as www.example.com.my. So my is stand for the country of Malaysia. We also have AU. AU is country code for Australia. So this is the example of top-level domain that most commonly used. We have .com, educational institution, government agencies, military organization, network providers or commercial companies, and ORGs stand for non-profit organizations. Now, what is domain name system? So we want to talk about who are responsible or what devices or what application that responsible to store all the IP address and the domain name. All the IP address and its corresponding domain name. This is the responsibility of domain name server, also known as DNS server. So what is DNS server? DNS server is a computer or a powerful computer with a database containing the public IP address. So in other words, they store all the public IP address associated with the website of an IP address. For example, when you type in the domain name such as www.kml.com, so the domain name will look at the database inside the domain name server. What is the corresponding IP address with http://www.kml.com? So this is actually the basic step. What happened after the user type in the address and how step by step the DNS point to the located devices or the intended website asked by the user. So it started with the domain name typed in by the user. Okay, the domain name is typed in by the user inside the browser searching bar. Okay, DNS and then finds the right IP address which corresponds to the domain name. DNS will find the right IP address which corresponds to the domain name. Once the DNS server finds the correct IP address, the browser will take the address and use it to send data. Then what happened? At the same time, DNS will point to the real address. The real address here is the IP address that contains the website. Now, at the end of it, the IP address then points to the location on the server that contains your website files. And this is the process from typing the domain name into. You are retrieving the address of the website or the information on the specific devices connected on the internet. As a summary, this is the relationship between IP address and domain name. So why do we need a domain name? The reason we use domain names instead of IP address is because for most people, a name rather than a series of numbers is much easier to remember. So your domain name points to your IP address, which in turn points to your website, which allow users all across the internet to view the web page. That is the end of our lecture today. So as I have here, this is a few slides to recap all the lecture session delivered just now. So try to discuss this question with your lecturer or among your fellow members. Thank you, everyone.